We are now held within un, sub, or supernatural forces. Discuss. What?
Hi friends, it's Wolf McNally. So I want you to do a thought experiment. You could do this, but just do it in your head at least. So I want you to imagine taking a coin and flipping it. If it's heads, keep going, flip it again. If it's tails, set your count back to 0 and start again. So I want you to count the number of times it comes up heads in a row. So the odds of flipping a coin fairly and having it come up heads 12 times in a row is 1 in 4,096. That doesn't mean 4,096 flips. It means 1 out of 4,096 runs of flips. So you would have to do this experiment 4,096 times before you'd come up with a sequence of heads 12 long. Most of you are probably not going to want to spend that effort, but that's the probability. So for years in my office, I had a coin on my desk upon which I had written the number 12. So anybody who asked, why is there that coin on your desk? It was a penny. I explained to anyone who asked that was my lucky coin because I had flipped it fairly 12 times in a row and it came up heads every single time. At some point, the coin disappeared. I assume a visitor who thought the coin magical wanted the luck for themselves and just helped themselves to it, but the truth is much simpler. I can make another coin flip heads many times in a row anytime I want, and you can too. How did I do this without taking years to do it and without any fakery or trickery? Well, I could just be telling you a fictional story. In the play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead by Tom Stoppard, the character Rosencrantz flips a coin heads 92 times in a row. There's astronomical odds against that happening, and this causes the characters to theorize that they are within unnatural, subnatural, or supernatural forces. And of course, in reality, they're fictional. And this is the author's way of suggesting that their fate is determined.
Heads. 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 Heads.
Heads. A weaker man might be moved to re-examine his faith. If in nothing else, at least in the law of probability. Heads. Consider. 1. Probability is a factor which operates within natural forces. 2. Probability is not operating as a factor. 3. We are now held within un, sub, or supernatural forces. Discuss. What?
So, am I telling you a fiction? Well, I'm not, and I'll tell you how I did it in a minute. The fact is that miracles are happening every day, depending on how you define miracle. People remark, well, that was a 1 in a million thing. You often hear about such things on the news. As Penn Jillette put it, if you define a miracle as something that has a 1 in a million chance of happening in a given day, in a city like New York with 8 million people, 8 people a day get to experience miracles. You're not likely to be one of them. You're not likely to win the lottery either, but someone will win it. And if you pay attention to the lottery, you'll see the winner is another average person like you. So life is full of little lottery tickets. The odds of a friend you haven't heard from in years calling on the day you happen to think of them are small, but they're not 0. And most people have a story of some kind like this to tell. The odds of you suddenly dropping dead from undiagnosed cardiac issues are low, but it happens to thousands of young and relatively healthy people each year. This isn't something to fear, but you need to know that unlikely good and bad things are happening all the time. This phenomenon has a name. It's known as the law of truly large numbers. And it says, with a large enough number of samples, any outrageous thing is likely to be observed. We don't notice average events, but we take particular notice of rare events. So we become blind to how many events of all kinds we're looking at to find those rare events. We're all prone to become blind to nothing burgers and notice the few things that sparkle. Psychic readers often get miss after miss after miss, but people who follow them remember the hits when the pronouncements seem to be right on. And gamblers tend to forget their losses and remember their wins. And slot machines reinforce this by making a lot of light and noise for the wins, and they remain dully silent for the losses. Okay, so flipping a coin heads 12 times in a row, extremely unlikely. So how did I do it? And how can you make such a lucky coin? So here's what you do. I went to the bank and asked for 1,000 pennies, rolls of pennies, so I had 1,000 pennies. I brought them home, unwrapped them, and poured them all into a shoebox. So you'd agree that 1 penny in a shoebox, if I closed the shoebox, shook it up really hard, and opened it, that would be a fair flip, right? You couldn't tell whether it would come up heads or tails. So if I put 1,000 pennies into the box and shake up the whole box of 1,000 pennies, then when I open the box, about half of them will be heads, about half of them will be tails. And so this is a little bit time consuming and tedious, but then you pick out all the tails. So, and you carefully don't disturb them, but you pick up all the tails, so you have about half of them out of the box, and the half that remain in the box are all showing heads, fairly. So then you close the box and repeat the process. And each time you eliminate about half of the pennies. And overall, you'll get 1 penny that ultimately survived to be flipped heads 9, 10, 11, even 12 times. And I actually got lucky enough, so I had a penny that got flipped fairly 12 times heads in a row. Obviously, nothing special about that penny, but it had to happen to some. There had to be some penny that survived the longest, or maybe a couple that tied, right? So, but sooner or later, if you flip those two, one of them is going to break the tie. So it's pretty obvious now, right? It's not magical at all. It's kind of common and dull, in fact. And that's why we need to remain skeptical when people tell us about miraculous 1 in a million events, because the law of truly large numbers says that miracles are happening all around us every day. And the internet and social media and the media make it that much more likely that you're going to hear about them, because they're exciting, because these things sparkle. So the next time you hear about something rare happening, whether it's somebody winning the lottery or a spontaneous healing or whatever, and I'm not saying there aren't, real religious miracles. I'm just saying that if we don't bring our whole minds to understanding the events around us, we're likely to end up being led away like sheep.